This tells me that there's something seriously wrong with his health, and he wasn't capable of making this statement. And he missed it. You can't afford to miss it. You cannot afford to make these sorts of mistakes. If you're trying to deceive the public are like those little investigators. You know? They notice things. They see things. You're talking about millions of people seeing this stuff. And they just can't get it right. They just can't get it right every fucking time. It's bad enough he can't blend his makeup. That's the other thing, is there's no sign of any makeup on his hands or anything. You know, it's just it's not real. It's just not real. What can I say? They're a bunch of frauds. They are. I'm sure there's people out there trying to say it is real. What are you talking about? You can see it clear as day. I was just showing you frame by frame, going through that. It is obviously not real, and it's AI generated. Clear as day. There you go. What do you reckon? Please leave in the comments down below, but please click the like button and maybe subscribe to the channel or bell icon.
Sunday dinner that makes it the best meal of the week. Maybe it's the steaming bowls of mashed potatoes and thick brown gravy. Maybe it's the tasty tender chicken fried up golden brown. Whatever it is, Sunday dinner is it. The best meal of the week. Only one little problem. Ever try taking it places? Like church socials, like church socials, parties, or ball games? Announcing the Portable Sunday Dinner by Colonel Sanders. The Portable Sunday Dinner by Colonel Sanders. He cooks up Kentucky Fried Chicken in his kitchen, then packs it up in his handy bucket. All you do is pick it up. Imagine, the best meal of the week travels everywhere, every day of the week. Okay, Colonel, hit the road.
There's no argument, is there? Honestly, that's clearly AI.
This is crazy because there's a long-standing conspiracy theory that there is an elite group of people that rule the world that are shape-shifting lizards. And it's been well documented over the years. People who believe this claim that you can tell who is a reptile because they don't sweat. Because of course, either do reptiles. Juliette Bryant, one of Epstein's victims and survivors, claims that her and other victims watched Epstein and his colleagues shapeshift into a lizard, and she even drew a picture of it. Which brings us back to Peter Thiel, who recently has been in the news for having a bunch of business dealings with Epstein. Well, people might say, well, there's so many videos of him sweating, so this can't be true. But I went back and I watched all of those interviews, and there's not one instance where a bead of sweat falls from his head. It looks more like he's wearing an oily lotion, because maybe his skin's so dry, if you know what I mean. This is probably just a crazy coincidence, but I'm curious, does your name spell anything out? Because mine certainly doesn't. As always, I want to hear what you think about all of this down below.
She raises a really good point. We always see him on video or giving interviews sweating, but at the same time, it doesn't really look like he's sweating. He's not dripping any sweat or beads of sweat. He's just very, very oily. In this next video from JVDS72, this is something I had spoken about previously months ago on my other channel, Minutes of Horror, about how doctors, hospitals, they are fully aware that people are alive, yet they still take them to go have their organs harvested because they put down that they are a donor.
So remember that conspiracy theory where it was saying if you have organ donor on your card and you get into an accident, hospitals will either let you die or actually actively try to kill you to get your organs? Well, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It has just been confirmed by a new article in the New York Times, and it says a push for more organ transplants is putting donors at risk. People across the United States have endured rushed or premature attempts to remove their organs. Some were gasping, crying, or showing other signs of life. I'm a little speechless because this is real. This is a real thing that's happened. They have so many different examples of this within this article. I read it for free because somebody posted a gifted version on Twitter. So go there to find this article if you want to read the whole thing. It's really disturbing and this is insane. I'm going to share this story first. In 2022, when she was 38 and homeless, Miss Gallegos, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, was hospitalized and went into a coma. Doctors at Presbyterian Hospital in Albuquerque told her family she would never recover. Her relatives agreed to donation, but as preparations began, they saw tears in her eyes. Their concerns were dismissed, according to interviews with the family and 8 hospital workers. Donation coordinators said the tears were a reflex. On the day of the planned donation, Miss Gallegos was taken to a pre-surgery room where her 2 sisters held her hands. A doctor arrived to withdraw life support. Then a sister announced she had seen her move. The doctor asked her to blink her eyes and she complied. The room erupted in gasps. Still, hospital workers said the procurement organization wanted to move forward. The coordinator said it was just reflexes and suggested morphine to reduce movements. The hospital refused. Instead, workers brought her back to her room and she made a full recovery. And she's
back enough of it over the decades, you can show that something shady is definitely going on.
Whitney Webb recently exposed Jeffrey Epstein's undeniable connections to intelligence services in the past in matters beyond child sex trafficking, actually money laundering and arms trafficking, and she answers the question as to why this is never brought up in relation to Epstein in mainstream conversations. She's the author of One Nation Under Blackmail, in my estimation, the best book on Epstein, so let's get her take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And Epstein during that time, before then, between 1981 and 1985, described himself as a financial bounty hunter. He was hired to find money that had been stolen, and he hid away stolen money for powerful people. He played both sides. And someone who can effectively do that, he was hired by very fancy, aristocratic people for those purposes, admittedly. Like a very aristocratic Spanish family being one of them. They would not just hire some financially illiterate idiot to do that kind of stuff for them. And Adnan Khashoggi was one of his clients too. He's not going to hire a financially illiterate guy to do that. I think that is, it's bull, and it's part of this narrative that's been woven about Epstein, about how he was just charismatic and him being good at anything else was just a facade.
So it's a distraction.
Well, yeah, because by that narrative inherently means don't look any deeper into what Epstein was doing, in his early history, for example.
Yeah, I generally agree. If you look at Epstein's past, the money laundering aspect and arms trafficking aspect is just as prevalent in his life and influences as the child sex trafficking and the blackmail operation potentially. So she's exactly right about that. Adnan Khashoggi was kind of a playboy from Saudi Arabia. The prototypical playboy, had expensive yachts and a harem, and he was involved in the Israeli side of Iran-Contra, moving weapons between the United States and Israel to fund the Contras. And, that's undeniable. And it is true that Epstein advertised himself as a guy that was a bounty hunter. He had learned money laundering schemes at Bear Stearns. We know that to be true. So I agree with her. This narrative that he was a bumbling idiot when it came to those things, I think is actually wrong.
Well, let's talk about that.
Sure.
Is this the arms trafficking?
Yeah, among other things. So
Okay, can we go back further, just for people who don't understand? How did he become a thing? Because wasn't he?
No one really knows, but it all
Yeah.
seems to have started with this backpacking trip to Europe in 1971, and this was when he was a college dropout. I think he went to Cooper Union, I think, for a few years, didn't finish. And then was started at NYU in 1971 and through 74, but didn't get a degree, something like that. And somewhere in 1971, he went backpacking to Europe, and he was in the UK. And so in the UK, he became close friends with this famous cellist, Jacqueline Dupree. And reportedly, he claimed through her got sort of an in with the royal family at that point. I don't really know if that's true, but he comes back from that backpacking trip and he's hanging out at Jimmy Goldsmith's house. And Jimmy Goldsmith is an interesting figure. If you are a fan of Adam Curtis documentaries, you may
Yeah.
remember him from the Mayfair set. He is a currency speculator, or was. He was very close to Robert Maxwell, among other figures. He was a member of this very interesting nexus. In Mayfair called the Claremont Club, which was sort of this elite gambling club that a lot of interesting figures were tied to, including figures with intelligence links, organized crime links, and sex blackmail links. So, for example, if you're familiar with the Profumo affair in UK politics, the nexus responsible for that, which brought down the government of Harold Macmillan, has its nexus at the Claremont Club.
Yeah, this was called playing the box, and this is a skill that, Epstein learned from someone, whether it was from the Claremont Club or from Adnan Khashoggi, this idea that if you commit crimes and violate the law, but you do it in a manner that embarrasses others, such as that charges won't be brought against you, and it's particularly embarrassing to other people when it's in accordance with what you did, that's how you can get away with crimes. And that's what Epstein employed throughout his career, whether it was on the arms trafficking and the money laundering side or, all other sides.
And Jimmy Goldsmith was a member of that, along with people that were also very close to Robert Maxwell, like Roland, or Tiny Roland, as he's remembered. And another well-known member is David Sterling, who basically started a lot of this movement, the private mercenary phenomena in Britain, among other things. So definitely a network of powerful people, and a lot of his early Epstein's early high society New York contacts. His earliest ones, a lot of them met him at Jimmy Goldsmith's mansion in New York.
Note that he had only made, maybe a few $100,000 at Bear Stearns when he worked his way up from the trade desk to become a partner of the firm, I think in something like 4 years. And he was a specialist at moving money. It seems like there was some, schemes to offset taxes for certain clients of Bear Stearns, and that's what he specialized in, and that's the skill he learned. But beyond that, it's not exactly clear how he made so much of his money. We know he got a lot of it from Robert Black, or Leon Black later in his life, and also from Les Wexner beginning in the 1980s. Wexner even gave him a $77 million property, the most valuable property in Manhattan. But it's not really clear how he made a lot of his money in the early 80s, but he was associated with these figures in arms trafficking like Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi.
How were they connected?
So originally he's networking.
Yeah, but he's a college dropout. Something happens when he goes to Britain. We don't really know, but he gets connected with this crowd.
Do you have a suspicion?
It may have been through his daughter, Isabel Goldsmith. She's in the Black Book. It's hard to know. Also, Jacqueline Dupree was reportedly cultivated ties with sort of the New York Jewish community because she converted to Judaism in 1967. She was married, I think, to an Israeli musician, but she was close also to Itzhak Perlman, who's a famous New York musician. I think he's a violinist. I can't remember exactly what instruments he plays. Sorry. But he and Epstein had a pretty significant relationship also. But it's important to point out, when I say Epstein had a relationship with people, I'm not saying they had a sex blackmail relationship necessarily. Yeah. What we're trying to untangle here is the truth of who Epstein was and why was he taken down, because I don't think he was taken down because in 2019 all of a sudden the US government became outraged about the sweetheart deal of 2007.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. We're only given breadcrumbs and trails that we can make connections based on the evidence that exists because there is a cover up at the highest levels of government to cover up this sex trafficking ring that involves some of the most powerful people in the world that was likely part of a Mossad blackmail operation for Israel. Because of his connections to Israel, which are prevalent, she talked about Robert Maxwell. We know he had a connection of to Ari Ben Minash, who was a Mossad asset himself, actually a Mossad agent himself, and said that Epstein told him he was engaging in blackmail. We know that he was good friends with Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, who himself was also the head of IDF intelligence, stayed at his house for prolonged periods. We know these connections exist, and I'm with her. This just wasn't about, coincidental rage toward Epstein in 2019 over what had happened with his crimes before. He had gotten away with everything up to then. And according to his lawyers, he was in high spirits at the time that, he supposedly killed himself.
12 years after the fact, and then wanted to rectify some wrong. I think it was about something else. He pissed off somebody, or something similar that befell Robert Maxwell, for example. But anyway,
Stop becoming useful, too much heat.
something. I have some theories. We can get to those later. But going back to early Epstein, so he's in this network with Jimmy Goldsmith, and he gets hired in 1974, which is the year he stops. Also, the year he stops going to university for any reason. And gets hired at the Dalton School, which is this elite New York private school. And he's hired by Donald Barr, who's William Barr's father. Donald Barr had worked at the OSS, and which is the precursor to the CIA. And then after that, had been involved in all of these programs to identify gifted children when they were, high schoolers and things like that. And Epstein would have fallen in that category. We don't know if there was a connection there, but Epstein graduated high school like 2 years early. He was a math whiz, and also got a scholarship to go to Interlochen, where he would later return to offend, actually, which is this kind of elite music school for really talented kids.
Yeah, Donald Barr was actually the father of William Barr, whose custody Epstein was in when he killed himself, actually, in 2019. And the crazy thing about Donald Barr, beyond his OSS connections, is the fact that he wrote a book. I think it was a few years after he hired Epstein to teach at the Dalton School with no credentials to do this. He wrote that space relations book about a planet ruled by oligarchs engaging in sex slavery. So this is the kind of book that Donald Barr wrote, eerily foreshadowing the future history of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It's really pretty uncanny if you look into this.
And I think he went there because he was good at the bassoon or something, but he was apparently really good at math, and could play a lot of different instruments, and was, reportedly very talented. And he obviously caught people's attention for some reason.
Was it Bear Stearns from there?
It was Bear Stearns from there. So, it depends on who you believe about who hired him, but it was Ace Greenberg at the end of the day, who became CEO or the head of Bear Stearns, I think, in 1978. But there's a lot of people, there's a lot of baton passing here for responsibility. And I think that's kind of common now that Epstein is kind of an infamous character.
Yeah, one of the stories has it that he was a math tutor after he had taught at the Dalton School, and through that's how he met Ace Greenberg. But it still doesn't really make sense how this, operator of Bear Stearns hedge fund is going to hire Jeffrey Epstein for no reason, a guy that was kicked out as a failed math teacher because he was fraternizing with young female students of his, eerily so, that freaked some of them out. And he's on the fast track from the trade desk, which he didn't succeed at, to the money laundering side of Bear Stearns, and then becomes a partner in something like 4 years. Another unexplainable aspect of his life.
Right.
Yeah.
So the sister, his allegedly it was the daughter of Ace Greenberg. She denies it. It was she says it was some kid at school, one of her friends another kid at school. Their dad was friendly with Greenberg and recommended Epstein to Greenberg. I don't know. There's all these different
The tutor math, supposedly, right?
Stories, but there's an agreement that it was Greenberg that brought him to Bear Stearns.
Okay.
It's a little complicated, sorry, but basically, Epstein joins Bear Stearns in 76, and by 1980 he's like a limited partner. He has a very
That's
meteoric
quick.
rise at the firm. Oh yeah. He was basically Greenberg's protege, and then he leaves in 1981. There's a lot of different stories there. But it seems like the most likely explanation is that there was this SEC investigation, because the trade at the center of that investigation happens the day before Epstein resigns Bear Stearns. And the official story that he had been fined for not reporting something in the expense account appropriately doesn't really make sense with why he would like leave a job as a limited partner, netting him a lot of money for a fine that was relatively small.
Yeah, there's other stories that he was improperly buying securities for his friends or something like that, and it wasn't actually related to the SEC, investigation. But either way, if you believe the SEC investigation explanation for why he left Bear Stearns, it was over, serving the client Edward Bronfman, who headed the Seagram's company.
And then you have other Bear Stearns executives and Epstein himself say, "Oh, I wanted to strike out on my own and make my own business." At that point, there again a lot of conflicting information, but the SEC case revolves around the Bronfman family, insider trading involving Seagram's, and a lot of other people that are sort of in this network. One of the guys involved in that insider trading scandal later becomes a big part of Jimmy Goldsmith's corporate rating in the U.S. and his acquisition of this company called Crown Zellerback. And which is part of this. I don't want to throw out too many names. It confuses people. But Drexel, Burnham, Lambert, they're like the heart of a lot of the savings and loans and junk bond scandal, financial funny business going on in the 80s. And Epstein has a lot of ties to that crowd. And so Epstein appears to have been advised to leave Bear Stearns because of that investigation. I argue in the book it was probably to take heat off of Ace Greenberg, who would become CEO at that point. Epstein was his protege, and having him sort of go and take the fall for it made it a lot easier.
That's a plausible explanation, but what we also know too, after he left Bear Stearns, is it was within months of that he somehow, on a private jet with Douglas Leese, this figure involved in arms trafficking operations in the 1980s, flying on a private jet to the Pentagon. For reasons we still don't know, but this is a known factor, that after he left Bear Stearns, he was suddenly involved with a famous arms trafficker on the plane to the Pentagon, and without explanation. This rise, it doesn't make sense unless there was some kind of intelligence connection with Epstein.
For them. But what's interesting about this too is that the lawyer for Bear Stearns up until a few weeks prior had been Bill Casey, who had just been tapped as Reagan's CIA director. So whoever Bill Casey left his whole legal portfolio to of all his long-time legal clients would have been the person to make that call. And then after he leaves, he, becomes involved in this financial bounty hunting where he's hiding and finding money for powerful people in, offshore shadow bank world. In 1981 is also where Casey brings in Khashoggi for Iran-Contra related purposes and all of that. And Khashoggi becomes Epstein's client. All sorts of things start to kick off.
Yeah, Epstein created his own company and said he was a financial bounty hunter, and he said his limitation was to be his client, you had to have $1 billion to invest through him. Not just be a billionaire, have $1 billion to invest through him. And there's not much evidence he actually invested on the part of these clients, whether it be Khashoggi or Les Wexner or others. That might have been a cover story for what he was actually doing, but we know he was interested in and skilled in money laundering.
Same names keep coming up over and over again. And sometimes not even just say it's the family.
Well, like I was saying earlier, we're not going to get a signed affidavit from like the CIA or, any intelligence agency talking about Epstein, including Israel's. So what are we left with? Well, we have to look at what is ultimately, I guess, circumstantial evidence, but you stack enough of it over the decades, you can show that something shady is definitely going on. And that's the reason my books are long and so detail oriented, is because that's all we really have in terms of open source intelligence to put all of this together. Right. And so
Tropical hot dog night. Like two flamingos in a fruit fight. Every color of day. Whirling around at night. I'm playing this music so the young girls will come out to meet the monster tonight. Tropical hot dog night. Like two flamingos in a fruit fight. I don't want to know about wrong or right. I don't want to know. I'm anywhere tonight. Tropical hot dog night. Like two flamingos in a fruit fight. Like stepping out of a triangle in the striped light. Striped light, striped light. Tropical hot dog night. Everything's wrong at the same time it's right. The truth has no patterns for me tonight. I'm playing this music